Good morning. It's Sunday, February 26th. I'm Veronica Cleary.
I'm Tom Fitzgerald. So glad to see you here this Sunday morning. We got in our third chair today, James Norton. He's the president and the founder of Play Action Strategies. Sitting in with us this Sunday. It's good to see you.
Morning. Thanks.
Real quick, just tell people what Play Action Strategies is.
We are a homeland security and political consulting firm that does a lot of work here in Washington, D.C.
Oh, there's a lot of work to be done here in Washington, D.C.
It's not boring.
I'm glad you do that. All right, thank you very much. Yeah. The Democrats, they did a big reorganization and shuffling of the table following that stinging defeat in November. Last night, down in the Big Easy, down in New Orleans, they chose themselves a new head of the DNC. The Democratic National Committee is now going to be led by the former Labor Secretary, Tom Perez, who also happened to be a former Montgomery County, Maryland council member. He served under former President Barack Obama, as you know. He was elected the DNC chair. Perez now has the unending task of crafting a national economic policy, coming up with a way for Democrats to win elections. He is the first Latino party leader of the Democrats. And here's what he had to say after he notched this win.
We are united as a party. We have so much work ahead of us because across America, people are fearful. People are fearful for our future. Democrats united are the hope for that future. That's right. And so we're going to put our values into action. We have a special election today in Delaware. We got boots on the ground. We've got actions all over this country today that strengthen numbers, the millions of people that have been coming out since the inauguration to say, Donald Trump, you don't stand for our values.
All right, so if you noticed there, it didn't take too long after all of that for President Trump to welcome Tom Perez to the fight here, tweeting, "Congratulations to Thomas Perez, who's just been named chairman of the DNC. I could not be happier for him or the Republican Party." A little bit of snark there for the president of the United States towards the new DNC chief. He went on to continue saying the race for the DNC chair was, of course, rigged. Bernie's guy, like Bernie himself, never had a chance. Clinton demanded Perez. Strong words there for the president, who never really seems to lack for strong words. But let me start with you, Veronica. You know, there was no clear favorite to begin with, you know, when this whole thing started. Keith Ellison was in the lead at the very beginning. Tom Perez came in later. There's no evidence that there was any rigging going on here, is there? You
know, it's funny. I actually think that there was an effort for the president to temper himself by putting rigged in quotation marks. I actually think that was him saying, well, it's the feeling of rigging because, you know, the guy who was supported by the Obama administration won again. I sort of noticed that. I think that might be one of the first times we saw him put something like that in quotation marks to say, to the left, don't take me literally, take me seriously. You know, that's that whole argument about the comments that he makes. But I would argue that that argument might have more sound had Ellison not been such a controversial candidate for DNC chair. What's your take on it?
Yeah, I mean, I think that if you look back to the 2016 campaign, had there not been superdelegates, Hillary Clinton probably wouldn't have been the nominee. And so I think there's this feeling that the establishment Democrats are still in control of the party and that Tom Perez is an establishment Democrat. And I think going into the 2018 election, we need to see if there's going to be a primary movement from Ellison and Bernie Sanders and his supporters to go after folks like Joe Manchin and Heidi Kintop from South Dakota versus what Perez and the establishment Democrats are going to want to do in this election. So I think that's something to really watch here going forward.
Well, how about this image here of the two of them? Oh, it's not on the screen right now, but the fact that they're wearing each other's buttons, that he appointed Ellison as the deputy chair immediately. Is that going to be enough?
I think we need to go just as far back as Bernie Sanders speaking at the convention for Hillary Clinton, and we saw how much effect that had on his supporters because they really didn't come out and support Hillary Clinton. That had a big impact on the election. So I think that's a great photo op, but I think long-term are the advocates and the folks that are out protesting and doing these different things that are really taking over the liberal wing of the party, are they going to come out and actually help?
You know, a lot of this stuff with the DNC, you know, and the RNC, it's a lot of inside baseball for your mom and pop out there in the country, because I don't think a lot of people care who are running these political parties. But, you know, Tom Perez is not somebody who has had a long history of fundraising. He's not somebody who has had a long history of crafting a national strategy for a major political party, or even, you know, working within the mechanics of the Democratic National Committee. So what do they have to do on just a gut bones level to kind of retool this Democratic Party and get it to where they need to be to start winning elections again. Because whether they like Tom Perez or whether they like Keith Ellison, if they don't start winning elections, none of that matters.
Well, I think sorry.
No,
I think first of all, they need an agenda, and I think that Donald Trump's agenda was one of economics, and that's why he won states like Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan, basically talking to traditional union Democrats about jobs and the economy. And I think the Democrats, if they're looking to retake those states or retake their agenda and move out, they're going to need an
They need to be
economic
more in touch with where people are in this country, which was wildly miscalculated, clearly, going into November.
Absolutely. They ran a campaign more on personal politics, attacking Donald Trump and talking about his personality and his habits and those type of things. And I think that didn't obviously resonate when it came down to it, and people wanted a jobs president. We elected a first-time private sector president.
It's been fascinating to watch this whole race unfold. It was a close race between Perez and Ellison. They needed 2 rounds of voting. Perez came only within 1 vote of winning on that first round of voting for DNC chair. And you know, as I said, Ellison has been criticized greatly over questions and comments from his past about Israel, his defense of the Nation of Islam, his commitment, whether or not it's there, to the Democratic Party. And so with this appointment of Ellison to be the deputy chair, let's take a listen to what he had to say.
I want to say that if you care about people who have their loved ones' cemeteries being desecrated, as the Jewish community is facing that right now, if you care about people who have walls being built against them, being banned for their religion, having their health care taken away from them, if you care about those people, then you got to stay in here and back Tom Perez for chair. That's what you have to do. This is not some sort of a little sort of it's not a small thing, it's a big thing. And the very fate of our nation, I believe, is in the balance right now.
And you know, Tom, I don't know what you think. I do think it was a smart move to appoint him as deputy chair. It did bring me back right to the Democratic primary and Hillary Clinton's decision, you know, not to nominate Bernie Sanders or Elizabeth Warren, a more progressive candidate, as her vice president. I think that the Democrats are realizing they need to unify. This is a step in the right direction, and maybe this isn't a topic that, you know, everyone focuses on, but inside the Democratic Party, this is a smart move.
We'll see. We'll see what he does, because if it's just this move where, well, you know, we'll give you a title and stand over there in the corner and we'll get back to you later, that's one thing. But they actually did give him some role. But I think it's a little early right now to say that they figured this all out, that they have unified, or that they are moving forward in any kind of a cohesive strategy. Because right now we were less than 24 hours into his term as chairman, and, you know, clearly on day one there are still divisions afoot. So we will see how that turns out. Meanwhile, folks, back at the White House, President Trump, we hope, has been spending his weekend preparing for his very first address to Congress. Now, this is going to take place Tuesday night, and question has been leading up to these last couple of days in CPAC's convention, the Conservative Political Action Conference down in National Harbor, is whether or not Donald Trump is now the standard bearer of the conservative movement. Remember, last year at the CPAC straw poll, Donald Trump didn't come in first. He didn't come in second. He came in third, behind Ted Cruz and behind Marco Rubio. So here we are in 2017. Donald Trump is the president. He is now the de facto leader of the conservative movement. But do conservatives themselves feel that way? Here's what one of the most outspoken conservatives in our area, Corey Stewart, had to say about that.
This is truly Donald Trump's movement at this point. He's been able to combine conservatism with populism, and we needed to do that. It's a winning strategy. It won in 2016 in a year which a lot of us didn't think was possible, and so I think it's definitely Donald Trump's movement at this point.
It was remarkable. They held another straw poll this year. 89% of those attending CPAC said that Donald Trump was in line with everything that they are doing in the conservative movement. James, this was a remarkable reception for the president this week. I didn't get any sense that they're holding their nose or folding their arms and waiting to see what he's doing. They like what he's doing right now, and they like it a lot.
Absolutely, and I think I would look immediately at the Supreme Court pick of Judge Gorsuch and the fact that Federal Society members of the conservative movement, to themselves, this is exactly why we voted for Donald Trump, and we wanted, to elect Republican, conservative, constructionist judges to be on the court, and I think that's an important thing to really take note of immediate action that he took.
When we look back at CPAC last year, there was a very real concern that perhaps Donald Trump was not as conservative as he was presenting himself to be, a history of being on the left and being liberal. But in this first month, whatever you make of what Donald Trump has done, he has proven himself to be quite conservative and put forth a very conservative agenda that would undoubtedly excite a base that you would find at CPAC.
Well, there were catcalls at some times when people would mention his name. There were boos that came out from the crowd last year. Okay. You mention Trump's name this year, you get cheers. So, of all of the corporate and the business success Donald Trump has had over his career, perhaps his biggest takeover ever so far has been this takeover of the conservative movement. Because what we saw this year is 180 degrees from what we saw just last year at this time. Pretty remarkable.
Looking ahead to Tuesday, I do think it's interesting. The White House has said that Tuesday's remarks will speak of a renewal of the American spirit. But if you contrast that to what we saw on Inauguration Day, which was many people felt was quite a dark telling of what's going on. I mean, do you think the sudden shift a month later, bringing this positive message forth, is that a reaction to maybe some of the negative pushback to what was said on Inauguration Day?
Well, I think that if you were a Republican, you understood what he was saying. If you were a voter of Donald Trump, you understood what he was saying, essentially that he's looking to bring people back to work. And if you've seen in some of the meetings he's had at the White House and during the transition, he's had meetings with business leaders almost every day talking about investment here in the United States. And I think that's a core issue for him. So I think going into 18 and 20, obviously he'll need to have achieved opening up factories and increasing the economy. The market's obviously been surging of late. I think tax reform is a red meat issue, obviously, for Republicans, and that's something that's a core to his agenda. He's got, Paul Ryan and folks working on that already.
James, I want to talk to you another issue that the president himself talked about on Friday, is that national security, defense, homeland security. This is something that you specialize in. From your seat on Tuesday night, what do you want to hear from this president in regards to what he says needs to be done about our military? And is our military and our national security as bad a shape as the president continually likes to say it is?
Well, sequestration was an issue that really took hold in the 2009 to 2014 time period under Obama, and it really bled the Defense Department and Homeland Security and other agencies in terms of spending and recapitalization, and they had a lot of retirements of troops, and so the military essentially went down, much like it did during the Clinton administration when it went down, when the priority was health care, just like it was during the Obama administration. So I think President Trump is going to focus on spending, going to focus on increasing the military and talking about our presence overseas. Obviously, with Homeland Security, immigration has been a topic here in the first couple of weeks, but there's also a lot of other parts of Homeland Security. There's cybersecurity, which is a big issue, transportation, and other type issues that happen at the department. So I think we're going to see a lot of those different things. I think General Kelly and General Mattis are off to a pretty good start here in terms of running their agencies.
All right, well, let's talk about something that just broke on Twitter. I think this was Saturday night. President Trump, he's breaking with decades of tradition, skipping the annual White House Correspondents' Dinner. Now, he made the announcement Saturday on Twitter. The decision to skip this social gathering with the press comes just after his remarks at CPAC, where he again called fake news the enemy of the people. Take a listen.
And I want you all to know that we are fighting the fake news. It's fake, phony, fake. A few days ago, I called the fake news the enemy of the people, and they are. They are the enemy of the people. Because they have no sources. They just make them up when there are none.
All right, so that's a recap of some things that we've heard from the president before. When I listened to that, it seems to me the president on Friday tried to do something a little bit different that he had not been. Tried to make the argument of why do I say the word fake news, all right? When he says they in referring to fake news, the president might want to take another look at that and say it. Because he tried to make the argument on Friday that, listen, it's not all of the media I'm against. It's not all of the press against. I am against stories that in particular, and we've seen some of them in the New York Times in particular, that rely solely on unnamed sources. Now, anybody who thinks unnamed sources are going to disappear from Washington, D.C. is kidding themselves. But if the president does want to make a point about particular items that he says are uncorroborated publicly, then maybe the word "it" would work a little better. Also, as far as not going to the White House Correspondents' Dinner, how could he go to the White House Correspondents' Dinner after all that has been said and all that has happened over the past 5 weeks in this administration? It would be the height of hypocrisy for the president to go down to the Washington Hilton on April 29th and take part in that dinner. Now, people are going to give him criticism for that in town. People are not going to like that in town. Parties are going to get canceled maybe. But outside of the Beltway, that plays pretty good. Because Donald Trump has said one thing consistently, and he said it over and over again, that I'm not going to be part of Washington. I'm not going to play their games. I'm not going to be part of what goes on there. And a big part of what goes on here every spring is that dinner. Even though it's a great organization that raises lots of money for scholarships, the president can't go to the dinner if he wants to really kind of be held to the fire on these statements he's been making against the media.
I also look back, though, it's very consistent with the Trump that we know, right? Donald Trump, he didn't show up at CPAC last year when it looked like he wasn't going to do well, when there was this threats of walkouts during his speech. He didn't show up at that Fox News debate in Iowa after all that had happened with the first debate. This is very characteristic Trump to not show up when he feels that the reception isn't going to be even more than warm and fuzzy, you know, enthusiastic, excitement. He would never walk into this room for all of the reasons that Tom mentioned, and then the fact that this is not a warm, fuzzy crowd, right?
Well, I think that you can say a lot of things about Donald Trump, but he's 110% authentic. We know exactly what's on his mind because we read his Twitter feed. We've never had a president in our lifetime, and maybe not after that, where we actually know what's on his mind every second of the day. You might not always like what he says, but you know exactly what's going on. And so I think, you know, things like the Washington Correspondents' Dinner, it's a lot of inside baseball, as you guys had mentioned, and I think that, you know, taking on the establishment and kind of flipping over the tables is exactly why he was elected by a lot of voters, is to get here and kind of do things a little bit differently that's been done in the past.
You know, it's funny what you said. It brings me back to our first topic where you said maybe we'll never see this again. Perez actually responded to what Donald Trump said about him winning the DNC chair, and he says, "I'm going to be your worst nightmare." And I thought, you know, how Trump-esque of him to really engage on that level of Twitter in that way. And maybe it's a sign that politicians on both sides see that a lot of people really respond to those 140-character messages to the public.
Well, what's
right?
no surprise here is that, you know, down at CPAC, when I was there on Thursday, and, you know, we had a rare appearance by Steve Bannon. Steve Bannon is not somebody who goes out and makes a lot of public appearances. Anybody who's surprised by this news about the White House Correspondents' Dinner is not paying attention. Steve Bannon said to our faces on Wednesday, it's going to get worse. If you don't like the relationship with the press right now, it's going to get worse, and it's going to get worse every single day moving forward, because they do view the media as the opposition party. It's not some wordplay. It's for real. And I think if we get into this situation where this continues, the media needs to stop complaining about it, all of us, because all we have to do is go back and do our jobs. Do our jobs, and that will take care of things, because their job is to do their job, the media's job is to do the media's job, and both sides should just get to work. We thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.